We begin today on the top of Daf Yud Amud Aleph, the second line. The Gemara over here said, according to Rabbi Yochanan, because the first Beis HaMikdash was built by Shlomo Melech, right, so the Shechina dwelled over there in a much more powerful way. Second Beis HaMikdash, the reason why it didn't end up being an eternal Beis HaMikdash is because it was built by the Parsiim. And therefore, the Shechina did not dwell there in the same way, and it was destroyed eventually. The Gemara brought the source because it says Yafta Lekim LeYefes Vishkan Bali Shem, that the second Beis HaMikdash was very beautiful, but it was built by the descendants of Yefes, which are the Persians. So the Gemara is going to bring the source from where we know that the Persians came from Yefes. Minalan de Miyefes Kaso. How do we know? Uparsoi, that is. Uparsoi Minalan de Miyefes Kaso. How do we know that the Persians come from Yefes? Chsiv the pasuk says, Bnei Yefes. Who are the children of Yefes? Goimer, Umagog, Umadai, V'yavam, V'tuval, Umeshech, V'tiras. So who are these children? Goimer, Ze Germania. Goimer is Germania. The Gra here is Goir is Germania, which is Germany. Magog zu Kandaya. Modai zu Macedonia, which is Macedonia today. Yavan Kemashmai. Yavan is Greece. Tuval ze Beis Unyaiki, wherever that is. Meshech ze Musya, zu Musya. And Tiras, the youngest of them, which is Tiras, Pligiba Rab Simai v'Rabbanan. V'amrila, others say Rab Simai v'Rabbanan argued about who this Tiras is. Chad Amar, one opinion is Zu Beis Taryaiki. One opinion is that it's Beis Taryaiki. And V'chad Amar, another opinion is Zu Paras, that Tiras is actually Paras. So Tani Rav Yosef, and then we learned that Rav Yosef also said Tiras zu Paras, that Tiras is Paras. So this is the source that Tiras is Paras. So we see that the youngest son of Yefes was Persians, Paras. Now, once the Gemara brings up the children from Yefes, the Gemara goes through over here another few things that it says when you get to here the children of Cham. So it says in the pasuk Safta v'Rama v'Saftacha. So there are two of them that are very similar, Safta and Saftacha. So who are they? What are they? Tan Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef said, Sakistan Gavyaisa. These are villages that were built on the inside, and Sakista Bar Yaisa, and villages that were built or surrounding on the outside. That's why they have similar names. Ben Chada Lachada, between the ones on the inside and the ones on the outside, Meya Parsi. They were pretty large actually, 100 parsa. Ve'akeifa, the circumference on the outside of these villages was alpha parsi, was 1,000 parsais. That's Safta and Saftacha. Another place the Gemara explains, I believe it says regarding Nimrod, Vatihi Reishis Mamlachtoi, the beginning of his kingdom was in Bavel, and Ve'erech, Va'akad, Ve'kalne. So where are these places? What are they? Bavel Kamashma, Bavel is where Bavel is. Erech, what's Erech? Ze Orichus. Va'akad ze Bashkar. Kalne ze Neufir Ninfi. Okay, that's what these places are. Mina Aretz Ahi Yotza Asher. From that place Asher left. What's Asher? Who's Asher? Tanir Rav Yosef. Asher ze Silik. This Asher is Silik. And he left from there. And what happened? Vayiva, he left. Vayivan as Ninveh, and he built another very large city. He built the city of Ninveh, one Daf Yud, and Daf Amud Aleph. Ves Rechai Vesir, and he built Rechai Vesir. Ves Kolach, he built these three cities. Ninveh, what are these places he built? Ninveh Kemashmai. Ninveh is a place of Ninveh that we know about, and we find later the story of Yoma. Rechai Vesir, Zupras the Mishan. This is the pras of Mishan. Kolach, Zupras the Bursif, another pras in the place of Bursif. And then it says in the pasuk, Ves Resen, there was the city Resen, Ben Ninveh u Ben Kolach. The city of Resen was between Ninveh and between Kolach. He Ha'irak Daila. This is the large city. So when it says Resen, what's Resen? Ze Aktisfain. This refers to Aktisfain. When it says in the pasuk, He Ha'irak Daila, this is the large city. So any ideya, how do you touch this pasuk? It's not clear which is the large city. In Ninveh Ragdaila, is the pasuk saying that Ninveh was a large city? In Resen Ragdaila, or is Resen a large city? Right. So, because when you read the pasuk, it says Ves Resen Bein Ninveh Bein Kalach Hiya Ragdaila. So what is Hiya Ragdaila going on Resen or on Ninveh? So the Gemara says, but Keshuaimer, then is the pasuk that it says by Yainav in Ninveh Haise Ir Gedaila Lelekim Mahalach Shleishus Yamim, that Ninveh was a large city. Avayim in Ninveh Ragdaila. Ninveh is a very large city. The Gemara now brings another place where there are names, but this is by the story of the Meraglim, and it explains the names that it says there. V'sham, there, they came to Eretz Yisrael. What did they see there? Achimon, Sheishai, Talmai, Yelidei Anok, the descendants of the giants. So Tana and Abraisi, we learned the meaning of these names. Achimon, Miyuman Shabachim, he was the strongest amongst the brothers. Sheishai, Shemeshsim Esa'aretz Kishichasais. He would make the earth like shichasais, meaning that their footprints that was so deep when they had made like a ditch in the ground when they walked. Talmai, Shemeisim Sa'aretz, Tlomim. They made the earth where they walked heaps, piles of earth. Davaracher, another pshat, Achimon Bona Anos. Achimon built the city Anos. Sheishai Bona Alush, he built Alush, and Talmai Bona Talbush, he built a city Talbush. Yelidei Ha'anok, they are the descendants of the giants. Why are these giants called Anok? Shemanikin Achama B'kaimasan. They're so tall that it looks like the sun is like a necklace around their neck, that their head goes up so high into the sun. Oh, Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, Omar Rebbe, in the name of Rebbe, Asida Roimi Shetipol Biyat Paras. The Roman Empire is going to be conquered and fall into the hands of the Persians. Shenema, it says in the Pasuk, L'chein Shuma Tzas Hashem Sheyotz Edom. The Eibishter is said, advised and said about Edom, which is Rome, Umachshavaisav Ashachoshav Al Yeshvei Teiman, Im Lo Yischavum Tziirei Atzain. Are they not going to be dragged away by the youngest of the sheep? Which the Gemara will explain means Paras, that they will drag away the Romans. Im Lo Yasam Aleim Noyam, that the Eibishter will put upon them Noyam, which they're going to be taken away from their empire. Maskif law. So that's the pshat that Rabbi Shua ben Levi said. That Seirei Atzain refers to the Persians that are going to take away the Roman Empire, which is Edom. Maskif law Rabbi Barula. So Rabbi Barula asked on this pshat, how do you know this? My mashma dahait Seirei Atzain parasu. What's your source that when it says that the youngest of the sheep are going to drag away Edom, that this refers to the Persians? So your source is the Chsiv, because there's another pasuk where it speaks about the Persian, is that it says Ha'ayel asher isa ba'al karnayim malchei modai paras. It's comparing the kings of Modai and Paras to the rams that have horns. So therefore, they are the sheep that it speaks about before, the tzayin or the flock. It goes on the Modai Paras that are compared to a ram. But he asks a question. Ve'emi Yovan. I also find that Greece, Yovan, is also compared to a tzayin. The Chsiv, Atzafir, Hasoir, Melech Yovan, the king of Yovan is compared to a goat. So maybe when it says Tzirei Atzayin from the flock, maybe it refers to Yovan. That was a question that Rabbi Barula asked. Kisalik Rav Chavivi Bar Surmaki Omra Kamei Da Humi Rabbanan. When he went there to Yisrael, he said over this question to one of the Rabbanan, and Amalei, and he answered and he said, Mandela Yoda Perushi Kroi, someone that doesn't know how to read and interpret the Mishalim of the Psukim, Maisif to Yuft Rebbe. He asked such a question to Rebbe. My Tzirei Atzayin. What does the passage before Tzirei Atzayin mean that the Tzirei, the youngest of the flock, will drag away Yadai? Who is this? This is Zutra Dachui. This refers to the youngest of the brothers of the children of Yefes that we quoted in the beginning of the Amid here. The Tanit of Yosef, as we said there, Tiras Zeparas. Tiras, which was the youngest of the children of Yefes. There was Goyim and Magig, Mada, Yuvan, Tevel, Mushach, and Meshach, and then Tiras. So Tiras is the youngest, and therefore he's called Tzirei Atzayin, the youngest of the flock, and that's the one that's going to drag away Edom, which is Rome. Amar Rabbi Baba Chan, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda, Zutre, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Loi, that is, Asida Roimi Shetipo Biyat Paras, also said the same thing, that the Romans are going to fall into the hands of the Persians. And Kavachaymer, and he said a different reason, not based on this pasuk, but he made a Kavachaymer. Mikdash Rishain, if when it came to the first Beis HaMikdash, Shabanu b'nei Shem, the Yidden, the descendants of Shem built it, v'chrivuhu Kastiim, and the Kastiim, which is Nebuchadnezzar from Bavel, they came and destroyed it. What happened? Naflu Kastiim biyat Parsiim. The whole empire in Bavel fell eventually into the hands of the Persians, of the Malchus Modai Paras. So Mikdash Sheni, the second Beis HaMikdash, Shebanu Parsiim. The Parsiim are the ones that built it. V'achrivuhu Roimim. And the Romans then came and destroyed it. And it then Sheyiplu Roimim biyat Parsiim. So for sure the Romans that destroyed this Beis HaMikdash, they should be conquered and taken away by the Persians that built the Beis HaMikdash. Rav, but Rav said that no, the opposite is going to happen. Asida paras shetipol biyad Raimi. The Persian Empire is going to fall into the hands of the Roman Empire. Amrulei Rav Kahana v'Ravasi l'Rav. Rav Kahana and Ravasi said to Rav, Benuye biyad sesurei. The ones that built the Beis HaMikdash, they're going to fall into the hands of the one that destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Why is that going to happen? Amalahu. So Rav answered in, yes, Gezeiras Melachi. It's a decree from the Eibusher. We don't understand why, but this is what's going to happen. Ikidamri. Others say, Amar, he said to them, Amar Lahu, he said to them, Inu nami hakasasri beknishta. Even the Persians, they're also not such big tzaddikim. They also destroyed the shuls, different shuls that were in their place. Tananami, we learned in the Braise, like Rav said, Tanya nami hachi, asida paras shatipu biyad raimi. The Persian Empire is going to fall into the Roman Empire. Chada, the Sasri Beknishta, and one reason is because they destroyed shuls. And v'oid gzeiras melachu, there's a gzeira from the Eibishter, sheyiplu bainin biyat saisrin, that the ones that built the Beis HaMikdash, the Persians, should be conquered and fall into the hands of the ones that destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, which are the Romans. Omer Rav Yudah Marav, and a source for this also is what Rav Yudah Marav said, Eim ben David ba, Mashiach doesn't come until the Melucha of the Roman Empire will be extended in the entire world, Tisha Chadashim, for 9 months. Shenema, you see this in the pasuk where it says, L'chein, this is Nevuah and Micha, I believe, right? It says about when Mashiach will come. So there it says, L'chein yitnem ad eis yeleda, that the Eibusher will give them to rule over the world the time that it takes the eis yeleda yolda, the time of pregnancy to give birth, which is 9 months, that they will rule over the whole world. That's the Roman Empire, and they will even rule over Paras. And then the Yeser Echav Yeshuvun al Bnei Yisrael, and then only after that, so he will rule over the whole world and everybody, and then after that the Yidden will return to Eretz Yisrael. So this is the source that the Roman Empire will take over the entire world. Not sure how you interpret this for today, Bisman, who's the Roman Empire today, who's the Persian Empire, and how this all plays out today. No. So we go back now to Lishkas Parhedrin, and this will start an interesting sugya that the Gemara will discuss, the halachas of mezuzah. Tana Rabbanam, we learned in the Braise. Kala Lishkas Shai b'Mikdash, all the chambers in the Beis HaMikdash, Loi Hoyelen mezuzah, did not have a mezuzah. It's not a dwelling where people live in it. It was used for storage, for different things. They didn't have a mezuzah. Chutz mi Lishkas Parhedrin, besides this room where the kain was kept for the 7 days, Lishkas Parhedrin, Shahaya ba Beis Dira, which was a place that was prepared and made for the kain to the kain gadol, for the kain gadol to be there for those 7 days. So it had a mezuzah. Amar Rav Yehuda said, "Va'le kama Lishkas hay b'Mikdash Shahaya lem Beis Dira." There were other chambers in the Beis HaMikdash that they also dwelled in it, that they also were living in it. So it should also have a mezuzah, and they still did not have a mezuzah. Ella, so rather he says, Lishkas Parhedrin Gezeira Haisa. The only reason the Lishkas Parhedrin had a mezuzah on it was a Gezeira midrabana, which the Gemara will soon explain. The Gezeira is, if you're not going to put a mezuzah on it, so then it's going to look like that the reason it doesn't have a mezuzah is because one of the places you don't put a mezuzah on it is in a prison cell. So if it doesn't have a mezuzah, it looks like you're locking him up in that room for 7 days, like in a prison cell. So Chachamim said you should put on a mezuzah. That's what the Gemara is going to say in the conclusion, as we'll see. Okay, so we have a machlokes here between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda regarding this Lishkas Parhedrin. The Tanakama says it has to have a mezuzah, and Rabbi Yehuda says it really does not. Like we find other chambers in the Beis HaMikdash don't have a mezuzah, because even if you dwell there, but it's not really made for dwelling, and therefore none of them have to have a mezuzah, but it's just a gzeirim midrabanan that it has a mezuzah. So the Gemara will now explain this machlokes. My time to Rabbi Yehuda. Let's understand the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Omar Rava or Omar Rabbe, Kesav Rabbi Yehuda holds, Kol bayis, she'eino osil, l'moisak chama, v'l'moisak shamim, any house, any room that's not made for you to live there all the time, in the summer and in the winter, ain't a bayis. It doesn't have the halacha of a house, a real dwelling that's obligated in a mezuzah.
A summer home doesn't need.
Huh?
A summer home doesn't need.
So if you have a summer home, which you're only using as a summer home, but it's built in a way that it could protect you from the rain and from the heat and from the sun and from the winter, so then if it's built in a way that it's just a temporary dwelling, like a place, in a way that, so then according to this opinion, it would not be obligated in a mezuzah.
During the summer, you can go during the winter.
Okay, but let's see where the Gemara went out with this. We'll see what the Gemara says here. Abaye asks the question, but there's a lashon of a pasuk where you see that it is called a bayis. Vaksiv, the pasuk says, Vihi Kesi, Beis HaChorev, Al Beis HaKayitz, the house, the winter house, on the summer house. So the lashon of this pasuk, you see that even a house that's only for the winter is called a house. Beis HaChorev, it's a house. The summer house is also called a house. So it should be chayiv and mezuzah. It is called a house. So how does Rabbi Yehuda say that it's not? On Malay, it's not called a regular house. Beis Chorev or Beis Kayitz. Yes, it's called a winter house or a summer house. But Beis Tama lo yikri. But it's not a real house. It's not a regular house that a person dwells there permanently in all seasons. So therefore, it's not chayiv and mezuzah. But on this Gemara, it asks the question. So the Gemara brings that what it says regarding a sukkah. Sukkah sachag b'chag. So in the sukkah, the 8 days of sukkahs. So Rabbi Yehuda mechayiv. Rabbi Yehuda says you'd be chayiv. Originally, this brayso is actually talking about the halacha of meiser, as Rashi here brings. Meiser, if you're still outside of the house, you're allowed to temporarily eat from the produce, from the grain, without taking any meiser. Once you bring it into the door, into your house, so then you're not allowed to eat from it at all before you give meiser. So the question is, if someone brought the produce into the sukkah, is that considered that you brought it indoors, that you brought it inside, you're not allowed to eat from it until you give meiser? Rabbi Yehuda says yes, mechayiv. Rabbi Yehuda says you brought it into the sukkah, you're going to be chayiv to take the meiser. Chachamim poitrin. Chachamim say you potter. It's not yet considered. The sukkah is not a bias. What's the lashon that the pasuk uses over there by meiser? Rashi brings it. Biyarti hakodesh min abayis. Has to be a bias. Sukkah is not a bias. So therefore Chachamim say you potter. V'tani Allah, in a brayso it says, Rabbi Yehuda mechayiv, Rabbi Yehuda, when he says that you chayiv and you treat a sukkah like a house, this is be'eruv, this is regarding the halacha of an eruv, talking over here about eruv chatzeris. When you have a chatzar, and a lot of people are living in the same chatzar, you have to make an eruv chatzeris. So if you have one person that has a sukkah that's open to a shared area, so that sukkah is considered to be like another house that's open there, and he has to be included in the eruv chatzeris, ube mezuzah. And also regarding a mezuzah, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the sukkah needs to have a mezuzah, or b'maiser. And then, like we said, regarding meiser, that you can't eat from it until you give the meiser. So what do you see over here? Rabbi Yehuda holds even a sukkah for 7 days of sukkahs is chayiv and a mezuzah. So how could you say that Rabbi Yehuda says that in the Beis HaMikdash, the chambers are not obligated in the mezuzah because it's not a dwelling that's made for all seasons? So maybe this that Rabbi Yehuda over here says that it's chayiv in mezuzah, it doesn't mean minat Torah it's chayiv in mezuzah. Maybe it's only a gzeira midirabanan, but really minat Torah you wouldn't be obligated in a mezuzah. Bishleime, so the Gemara says bishleime eirov mezuzah ikla meime midirabanan. When it says that Rabbi Yehuda would obligated in the sukkah, so for regarding eirov and mezuzah, you could say that he only obligated in the mezuzah midirabanan. Ella meiser, but to say that regarding meiser, the produce that's brought into the sukkah, that you'd be chayiv to take the meisers from it. Only midrabanan, mi ikla meima midrabanan, could we say that you're obligated to take from this meisers midrabanan? Dilma asi la frushi minachiyev ala ptur. If you're going to obligate a person to take meisers when he brings it into his sukkah, even though minat Torah is potter from meiser, you're going to come to separate meisers from something that's chayiv on something that's potter. And then from something that's potter and something that's chayiv. So Chachamim would not machayiv a person midrabanan to give meisres in this kind of a way. So you can't say that Rabbi Yehuda, when he says yechayiv, he only meant that yechayiv midrabanan. There's a long thesis here on this. And Taisus points out that you do find many other places where Chachamim did make a gzeira that you should be chayiv in meisres midrabanan. We just learned the sugya yesterday regarding demai. That's a gzeira midrabanan that you give meisres. But in all cases where Chachamim made a gzeira that you give meiser midrabanan, there's always a certain distinction that Chachamim made. Right, so they made a gzeira that you should give meisres, but you don't have to give trum gedola. There's always, you can see that it's only a meiser midrabanan. So you're not going to come to confuse it with something which is chayiv minat Torah. But here we're talking about this obligation of being brought into the house. That it's considered that it's brought into the house and you chayiv to give meisers, and there'd be no distinction between the chayiv minat Torah and chayiv midrabanan. So therefore, the Gemara is saying that you'll confuse the two. Chachamim never made such a takana. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda was saying with the minat Torah that a sukkah minat Torah is chayiv in a mezuzah, and it's chayiv in meisers, and it's also chayiv in this person has to participate in the eruv. So therefore, question is, how does Rabbi Yehuda say in the Beis HaMikdash that the chambers are potter from the mezuzah minat Torah? So the Gemara brings another pshat, Elo Amar Abaye, so therefore Abaye says, B'Shiva, in the 7 days that the Kayin is there in the room, in the Blishkas Parhedrin that he separates there. So the Kulam Olei Pligi de Mechayve. Everybody agrees that for those 7 days it has to have a mezuzah because he's living there then. So it has to have a mezuzah. Ki Plige, when's the argument between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda regarding this Lishkas Parhedrin, if it needs a mezuzah minat Torah, or only midrabanon, b'shar yemais hashana, on the rest of the year when no one's living there. Rabbanan Savri, Rabbanan say, Gazrinan, Shar yemais hashana, Otu Shiva, there's a Gzeira, the rest of the year, because of those 7 days that it needs a mezuzah. So if you're not going to put the rest of the year in mezuzah, you might forget to put the mezuzah on those 7 days that the Kayin is there. Rabbi Yehuda Savar loy Gazrinan. Rabbi Yehuda says there's no such Gzeira. The rest of the year there's no mezuzah. Then during these 7 days you have to put up a mezuzah. There's no reason to make a Gzeira. But Rabbi Yehuda still is saying in the Braisa that they did put up a mezuzah the rest of the year for a different reason. Like I mentioned before, in order that we shouldn't look at this room to be like a kind of a prison. So therefore, Rabbanan said, put on the mezuzah for the rest of the year as well. That's a bias pshat in this braisa. So they're arguing about the rest of the year, but in the 7 days when the kain is there, it needs a mezuzah minat Torah. Amalei Rav argues on this pshat of Abaya. For hasukah sachag b'chag ketani. What does it say in the braisa? What's the opinion of the Rabbanan? That according to the Rabbanan, the sukkah on the 7 days of sukkah, it doesn't have to have a mezuzah. How could you say that everybody agrees that those 7 days that the kain is in the lishkas parhedrin and it needs a mezuzah? Rabbanan say regarding a sukkah that even the 7 days of sukkah it does not need a mezuzah. So Rav gives a different shot. On the rest of the days of the year, kulam olei pligi the petura. Over there's no machlokes. The rest of the days of the year when the kain is not living there in this lishkas parhedrin, everybody would say that it's pater from mezuzah. Ki pligi, when is the argument here? B'shiva, regarding the 7 days that the kain is in the lishkas parhedrin. And now, the halacha regarding the Lishkas Parhedrin is different than the halacha that it is by Sukkah. Right? By Sukkah, Rabbi Yehuda required the mezuzah minat Torah. And regarding the Lishkas Parhedrin, Rabbi Yehuda says that you don't need a mezuzah, and it's just a Gzeira midrabanan. And they're different. Now the Gemara, Rava will explain that Sukkah and Lishkas Parhedrin are not the same. The Sukkah time meluchod, the halacha of the Sukkah has a reason for itself. Vilishka time meluchod. And the requirement of a mezuzah in the Lishkas Parhedrin has a different reason. The Gemara explains, Sukkah time meluchod, there's a reason why by Sukkah Rabbi Yehuda held it has to have a mezuzah. Rabbi Yehuda l'taimei. Rabbi Yehuda follows his opinion that he says in Masechta Sukkah, the Omar, Sukkah diras kva be'inon. The Sukkah has to be built in a way that it becomes your established place. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda in the beginning of Masechta Sukkah that says that when you build a sukkah, it could even be a very tall sukkah, even higher than 20 amas. It could be a permanent structure because the sukkah has to be a permanent adiras kva. So if it's adiras kva, mechayve mezuzah. Therefore, it's obligated to have a mezuzah. But Rabbanan l'tamayu over there regarding sukkah, the Rabbanan's opinion is that it's pater from mezuzah. The Amri sukkah diras arai binon. A sukkah has to be a diras arai, a temporary dwelling. So if it's a temporary dwelling, v'loy mechayve b'mezuzah. If it's not obligated, the mezuzah. So obviously we paskin like the Rabbanon that a sukkah does not need a mezuzah. By the lishka and the Beis Hamikdash is a different reason. The lishka time meluchod, the machlokes regarding whether the lishka needs a mezuzah or not is a separate inyan. Rabbanan Savri, Rabbanan holds that dira balkarcha shma dira. When you're living in a place, even if it's not something that you're choosing, it's an obligation. You must go there on these 7 days. It's sort of against your will. Nevertheless, that's called a dwelling, and therefore it's obligated in the mezuzah. Rabbi Yehuda says dira balkarcha lo shma dira. That living there against your will, that's not called a dira. This is an obligation. This is the mitzvah that he has to be there for the 7 days. It's not a house that he builds for himself by choice. So therefore, it's not called a dira, and therefore you don't have to put up a mezuzah minat Torah. But the Rabbanan who take the kinu law, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbanan still instituted that you should put up a mezuzah on this Lishkas Parhedrin, shelo yaimru kayin gadol chavosh beveis ha'asurim. In order that you shouldn't say that, look, the kain is in a room without a mezuzah because the room that he's in, he's being like locked up in a prison. So Chachamim didn't want it to look that way, so they said to put up a mezuzah. Just to finish off, the Rishayim over here asked a question on this Gemara, that l'chayra, the reason that it says regarding the Lishkas Parhedrin that person is living there not by his choice, but it's because of the obligation that the kain has to be there for those 7 days. So why don't you say the same thing about the sukkah? A Yid that goes into a sukkah, it's also not by choice. It's all by force. By force, it's a mitzvah that he has to be there. So the same reason that Rabbi Yehuda says over here should apply to the sukkah. What's the difference? So there's a lot of answers that Rishonim give. One answer that Rishonim say is it's not the same. But you go into the sukkah, you can go into the sukkah together with your whole family. So even though it's taka mitzvah, it's not by choice, but nevertheless, that's a dira when you're there with the whole family. By the kohen, when he goes into the lishkas bar hedre and he has to be separated from his wife and his whole family, that's why it's called a dira bal korcha, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that minat Torah, it's pater from his zuzah.